go down, or if you want to try climbing again.
I'm good,
he said brusquely.
You go on.
She glanced at him in surprise. Then something in her expression shifted. She shrugged, grabbed for a handhold, and resumed her swarm up the wall like a cat. If cats climbed walls. Her sleek dark brown ponytail swayed against the crossed straps of her deep yellow tank top, and her bum looked every bit as choice, framed by that harness, as it had when he'd first seen it. When he'd followed it up this bloody thing, like some kind of hormone-crazed teenager.
Try something easier first,
Mako had cautioned. But oh no, Nate thought bitterly. He hadn't listened. Mako had been coming to the climbing gym for a month or so now, ever since they'd come back from the World Cup. Had kept talking about his lessons until Nate had become curious to see what the fuss was all about.
Mental fitness,
Mako had called it when Nate had expressed his surprise. Climbing didn't seem like an obvious choice for his best mate. Mako didn't exactly possess the lean, streamlined body type that predominated in the gym. Not so much of a race car, Mako. More of a tank. But when Nate had seen the two women preparing to tackle the toughest-looking wall in the place, the sport had become a whole lot more attractive.
That climb's dead hard,
Mako had cautioned again, as Nate clipped into the rope at the base.
I've only done it a couple times myself, and you've only just finished with the training ones. Try something easier first, mate. She's doing it,
Nate had argued, jerking his chin towards the rope fixed next to them, where the brunette had already begun her graceful, startlingly rapid ascent, belayed by a truly spectacular blonde, who hadn't looked at them, her eyes glued to her climbing partner, her hands moving steadily to keep the rope taut.
She's good, though,
Mako had attempted to explain.
Right,
he'd sighed in resignation at Nate's scowl, clipping into the rope himself.
Struggled to get you, didn't I? And it was well worth it.
He pulled into a parking space on a street overlooking the lights of the harbor below.
Bit of a climb up the hill here to the house, he told the women. Hope everyone's shoes are okay with that.
Who is this person whose party we're going to? Allie asked, as she slammed the car door. This Toro guy. I guess with a name like that, he's a rugby player. Good thing, because carrying groceries up here must be a major challenge. The new All Black captain, Hannah explained. Captain of the Hurricanes, too, Wellington's Super 15 team. You'll be hearing more about them pretty soon, once the season starts. It's been an extra long off-season since they played the World Cup in October. Are they training already, Drew?
Pre-season training for most of the boys would have started already, Drew said. Mid-December now. But the All Blacks don't have to turn up to their teams until the 1st of February this year. Oh, some of them will start sooner. So, yeah, long break. Gives them time to take a real holiday, let all the niggles settle, get fired up to go again.
It must feel strange, not going back, Kristen put in. She still sounded a little shy with her brother-in-law, Allie thought, even after all these years.
It does, a bit, Drew admitted. I'll keep having to remind myself that I'm not doing this anymore. It's all good, but it's a bit odd. I won't be turning up at many of these things. Need to back off, let the new skipper take the reins. And the spotlight. He's welcome to that. But as we're down here, I thought it'd be a chance to have a chat with a few of the boys. Introduce you two around.
That had been Hannah's idea, Allie suspected. The visit to Wellington and the party tonight, too. Making sure her beloved sister was settled, even if it meant leaving their 2-year-old fit him out. He stopped thinking about his friend, though, when he saw the other one. The blonde he'd stood next to at the gym this afternoon. The one who had barely noticed him beside her. So fiercely had she been concentrating on belaying her friend. On getting it right. He'd thought she was gorgeous then, without any makeup. Her golden hair pulled into a high ponytail. Her tall showgirl figure rocking the simple t-shirt and climbing pants. Not to mention the harness. Yeah, the harness. And now, in all those lace clothes that made him think immediately of lingerie, the high heels making her endless legs appear even longer, the waves of golden hair falling around her face, down her back. She was nothing short of spectacular. The skirt was long enough. At least it would have been on somebody without all that leg. And nothing was all that tight. It was just her. But something was wrong, he realized. She stood a couple meters away, facing him, several of Liam's Hurricanes teammates surrounding her, doing their best to chat her up. It couldn't have been a new situation for her, somebody who looked like that. She had a glass in her hand, a smile on the beautiful lips. But the smile was frozen, and the sapphire blue eyes had a desperate look to them that he recognized. She was doing her best to maintain, but for some reason, she was overwhelmed. Kristen tried to overcome the feelings of panic. Breathe through it, she told herself desperately. Ride the wave. But nothing was working. She felt trapped, and she was going under. She'd tried to find some women to talk to, but somehow had never been able to join the group, hovering at the edge until she'd given up. She wasn't sure where Allie was, and Hannah and Drew were in the midst of a group of people in the far corner of the room. So here she was, standing in a group of men, all too big, too tall, too avid, while the familiar coils twisted in her belly, rose through her body. She started at a touch on her arm. It was the man from the gym, she realized, the one who'd stood next to her, belaying his friend while she had been doing the same for Allie. She'd noticed him because he hadn't tried to talk to her. He'd just smiled at her, and she'd thought all the time that he had the kindest eyes she'd ever seen. Now those eyes held a look of concern, and the smile was missing. "All right?" he asked her quietly, his deep voice still audible over the hum of voices, the pulsing background music. She started to say she was fine, changed her mind as the anxiety spiraled higher. "Is there a quiet place?" "Yeah, come with me." She cast an automatic smile around the group, then followed the solid, thick figure leading the way. He stepped through the lounge doorway into a passage, and she worried for a moment that he'd misinterpreted her question. But he was walking into a big modern kitchen now, where he'd stopped at the breakfast bar and turned to her. "Sit down," he told her. "Glass of water?" "Please," she said, her breath still feeling too shallow. She hopped up onto a stool and hooked her high heels over a rung, pressed her hands between her knees for warmth. He nodded, turned to a cupboard, seeming to know his way around perfectly, pulled out a couple glasses and filled them from a bottle in the fridge, handed one to her. "Cheers," he said, a smile lightening the effect of the much-broken nose, the misshapen ears and close-cropped wavy black hair, over a neck that was so thick it was almost a continuation of the head above. Then he looked at her more closely. "Breathe," he told her.
Says. Allie could see the color rising again as Kristen resumed. "He says he doesn't think that's the reason for the bad blood." "Did Nate give him some other reason?" Allie pressed. "Well, no," Kristen admitted. "I don't think so. But Liam's so kind. I can't believe he'd have a good friend who was the way Devin says." "Of course he thinks the best of his friend," Allie said impatiently. Honestly, Kristen could be so naive at times. It was like she still didn't want to believe there were bad people in the world, even with all the evidence she'd collected to the contrary. "But I believe Devin. Why would he lie to me?" Kristen shrugged. "I don't know. Your date was good then? You liked him?" "Lots of fun. That is, I guess it was a date. We did start talking about the netball team thing, and I think it could really work. But then we just talked, and he was so interested. Not how men usually are, at least in my experience. How often does a man really listen to you? It was great. And she said thoughtfully, That was the first date with a new person I've been on in years. And it was so much fun. I wouldn't have thought that could be true. Her first date since her senior year of college. Not that you would call most of the hanging out she'd done in college dating. There hadn't been much dating with Brian either, come to think of it. Mostly climbing together, backpacking, going out for Thai noodles when they could afford it, being poor together, which had been fine with her. But no romantic gestures. She'd never thought she'd needed them. Brian had sure never looked like that in his clothes. So elegant, and yet so casual. He'd been a whole lot more likely to wear Vibram 5-fingered toe shoes that had Allie cringing in embarrassment than an open-necked shirt under a slim European-cut suit. He'd never looked at her meaningfully across a glass of wine in an elegant restaurant, had never touched her hand lightly, smiled at her like that, leaving her tingling, wondering what he was thinking, wanting more, and then ending the evening with a quick kiss, another smile, and no mention of whether she would see him again, whether it was more than just business, leaving her off balance, which was actually kind of fun too, in a bizarre way. Exciting. New. But how was the climbing today? She asked guiltily. She hadn't even asked Kristen, had been too wrapped up in her own affairs, too excited by the prospects. All the prospects. You'd left by the time I got to work. It was good, Kristen said. He's so nice. And when he's holding the rope, it's like I know he'll never, ever let me fall. Well, thanks very much, Allie said tartly. Oh, I didn't mean you'd drop me, Kristen hurried to say. Did you guys go out afterwards? Just for a quick coffee. Kristen actually sounded happy about that. I was nervous that he'd ask me for more of a date, and I'd have to tell him no. But he didn't even ask. He just said he'd really enjoyed climbing with me, and did I want to go again after the New Year, as he's leaving town for the holiday in a few days, just like we are. And when I said yes, he gave me his email and phone number, and asked me to let him know whenever I needed a ballet partner. He said he'd probably only need half an hour's notice, and he could be at the gym whenever I was ready. So he asked you to ask him out. And that was a bonus? Guys always ask me out, Kristen said simply. Nobody's ever let me make the move like that. Now I get to choose, even if I want to climb with him. And I do.
Tea with a hooker. Is that all right with you, Allie? Hannah asked again. To have company on our outing? What? Allie looked up from her cozy spot. Her boo had been putting her up for a week now. Babysitting for a few hours was the least she could do. And going kayaking with Nate? She needed more time with him, like a hole in her head. But when it came down to it, that was exactly what she got.
If it's all the same to you,
Liam said, when they were all sitting on the deck, listening to Drew's plan for the day.
I'll stay here. Give Kristen a hand minding Jack. I'm not too keen on kayaking anyway, to tell you the truth. Terrible thing for a Mary to admit, but I get seasick. I'm better with babies than boats.
The way Kristen's face had lit up when the men had pulled into the driveway, and she'd seen Liam emerge, had been too obvious for Allie to make any further objection. She knew how wary Kristen was about men. But Liam seemed to have made it past her barriers.
Cheers,
Drew said.
That makes it easy. Though it's not going to be too challenging today. We'll be keeping it pretty short and simple.
He reached an arm out to pull his wife gently against his side on the wooden porch swing.
Have to keep Hannah's stomach happy.
We're expecting another baby, Hannah told the men, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. We're not announcing it yet because it's still early, so don't say anything, if you don't mind.
No worries,
Liam said with a smile.
That's great news. Congrats. Benefits of retirement, Drew said. I get to be here for this one. Change a few more nappies, eh?
You'd better plan to change all of them if you're going to make up for all the ones you've missed, Hannah teased. I noticed you didn't retire until I got Jack toilet trained. Very sneaky. And you'll be here for all my morning sickness, too. Sure you don't want to rethink retirement? Drew laughed.
I'm sure. I'm ready to put in the hard yards.
Nate glanced at Allie, where she had swung herself up to perch on the railing.
I can see you over there, imagining yourself being capsized. No worries, I'll stay a safe distance.
I've got a question for you, Allie said, as they left the area behind, headed further up the coastline. My own conversational topic. Those nicknames you guys have. You always call Liam Mako, don't you?
Yeah, rugby nicknames. We like nicknaming things anyway in NZ, and with rugby, it's a bit of a tradition. A bonding thing, I guess.
All right, so what's Mako mean? Isn't it a fish?
Yeah, it's a play on his surname, of course, Mahaka. But Mako's Maori for a type of shark. Fastest shark there is. Aggressive, too. Hook a Mako, and it can jump straight into your boat and fight you. Hard as hell to bring in. No quitting them at all. And that's Mako, too. Takes 2 or 3 blokes to bring him down, and he'll be fighting all the way to the end, every time. He's the man you want beside you in the tough spots. He's a warrior.
He didn't seem like that, Allie said in alarm. What Hannah said. Does he have anger issues? Should I be concerned for Kristen?
What I said, it's just on the paddock, he assured her. It's a rugby nickname, eh? With women, nah, no worries.
Okay, Allie said dubiously. I guess you'd know. And your nickname is Toro, for Torrance. I figured that out. But if Mako's about the shark, Toro probably does have to do with the bull thing, right?
So they say.
Okay. That was about all she was going to get out of him, which made her wonder just what that nickname really was all about. Don't go there, Allie. So what's Drew's nickname? She asked instead, turning her mind hastily from the danger zone. Everyone seems to just call him Drew.
Well, his name's Andrew, Nate pointed out.
Yes, and your name's probably Nathan. Why isn't he Callie or something? Callow. Drewy. A laugh escaped her, the coastal vista spreading before them. The indentations of rugged cliffs creating hidden bays, the foaming lines of white surf, and endless corrugated blue of the sea beyond. It was fairly nice. He'd got that bit right anyway, and she actually sounded pleased, to his relief. He couldn't imagine another woman who'd have got her legs scratched up like this without whinging. And she wasn't even a Kiwi. Maybe Canadians were tough too, though. He hadn't known enough to tell. He turned now as he crossed a stile into a paddock, reached for her hand. Nate, she sighed, I appreciate your gentlemanly concern, but you don't have to help me. I can do the uphills and I can do the downhills, too. I can cross a stile without falling. I'm sorry if you'd like me to be more helpless, but I can't fake it.
Yeah, right.
He was thoroughly rattled now. He kept forgetting that she was a professional, kept automatically reaching back for her. This wasn't going well at all. He thought it'd be a chance to make up some ground. Instead, he was on the back foot once again. Right then. Conversation. He'd try that.
This is some more of the honesty thing, he said,
embarking on a steep uphill section of track and making a conscious effort not to help her.
Making up your own rules for dating, because you haven't done it in years.
That's it, she said cheerfully, sounding not in the least winded as she came along behind him. For somebody with such a pretty body, she was in fantastic shape. Or maybe that was why she had such a pretty body. Geez, he was losing his train of thought again. Back to the topic.
So why is that? Scare them all away?
She'd teased him enough. He'd try a bit of it on her. She laughed. Okay, teasing was working. No, I had somebody. Well, sort of. After all, he'd like to see her wet again. He'd like to get her wet. All that honesty in bed? That would be a novelty. She was flexible, too. He'd seen that when she'd been climbing. He had a sudden vision of pushing those legs up over her head, and had to pull himself back fast, getting way ahead of himself here. "What are you thinking about back there?" she asked. His mind blanked. She turned on the track to smile at him, a smile that faltered as she looked at him, read something of his thoughts on his face. He schooled his face quickly into a neutral expression.
"Sorry," he said. "Off someplace for a moment there."
She nodded and turned back, the silence getting a bit awkward. They reached the steep section again, and she headed uphill at a good clip. He watched her climb, tried without success to keep the image of his hands yanking those shorts down, of a bit of athletic outdoor sex, somewhere with less gorse, obviously, from entering his unruly mind, and followed after her.
"Careful,"
he couldn't help from saying, just as she stepped on a loose rock that rolled under her left foot, and he saw her start to fall. He lunged, grabbed for her, and pulled her further off balance. She twisted as she tried to regain her footing, her right foot sliding off another slippery rock, and she toppled. He felt the thunk as her face made solid contact with his elbow on the way down. She let out a little yelp, fell to her knees, put her hands out to catch herself, not quite quickly enough.
"Allie!"
He grabbed her, pulled her upright again.
"Are you all right?"
"Yeah," she said with a shaky laugh. "After all that telling you I didn't need help." She put a hand to her eye. "Ow." He helped her up the track to a level spot.
"Let me see."
He took her face in his hand.
"Bloody hell. I've punched you in the eye."
The red bruising was already apparent, her eyes starting to swell a bit, too. He'd thought he couldn't cock things up with her any worse than he already had. And now this. She looked up at him and started to laugh, then winced at the motion. "Ow, it really hurts. Oh, I hope this is a first, that you've never given a woman a black eye before."
"Bloody hell,"
he said again, feeling horribly responsible. He looked down at her knees, the cut that had opened up on one of them, the bruising from her fall onto the rocks.
"Oh, your leg, too."
He pulled his water bottle from his pack, bent to squirt the clean water over the spot.
"We'll wash a bit of the dirt out of it anyway. It's not bleeding too badly. Are you okay to walk back?"
"Well, yeah," she said with another laugh. "What are my options? You going to helicopter me out?"
"I could run back for the ute, drive up the farm track. Get closer anyway."
"No, it's less than an hour, isn't it? I'm fine. I can do that." Still, by the time they were back at the ute, she was limping pretty badly, and that eye was puffing up even more. He was going to have some interesting questions to answer from Drew, Nate thought suddenly. He knew the other man wasn't his skipper anymore, but he couldn't help thinking of him that way. And punching his house guest in the face, that probably wasn't on.
"We'll go sit in the cafe for a bit. Get some ice on your face and your knee,"
he decided, as he put the ute in gear and pulled off the verge. "Oh, you don't want to do that," she objected. "You don't want everyone to see me with you like this. They'll take your picture, you know they will. And then there you'll be, sitting with a woman with a black eye. I've spent enough time with Drew and Hannah to know how interesting that'll be to your eager public."
"What? It doesn't matter."
He brushed the allowing Kristen the safety of their pint-sized chaperone, not rushing her or asking too much. Maybe the shark thing really was just about rugby. She didn't mean to eavesdrop. Really, she didn't. But what could you do when people insisted on talking outside your open window? They must not have realized her room was back here. Everyone else was in the lounge at the other side of the house, she knew. She started off amused at their conversation, and then it changed to something much less comfortable.
"I'm just saying, be careful,"
the voice she recognized as Nate's was saying now.
"I wouldn't do anything else,"
Liam growled.
"I need to be careful, don't I? Because she's fragile." "That's what I mean,"
Nate said with obvious exasperation.
"It's one high-maintenance woman, And an expensive one, too. She's already got one failed marriage behind her, from what I hear. How do you know she's not over here hopping to bag number 2 and finding an All Black, first time out of the gate, ready to get soft about her? You're dead wrong about her. And there are 2 of us over here today,
Liam pointed out.
I could say the same to you. Yeah, but I'm not the one flirting with career suicide, looking to mess with Drew's sister-in-law,
Nate said, keeping his voice low, but not low enough.
And I'm not about to get trapped either, or get myself off track. I know how to keep them from expecting too much. Look, it's one thing to have a bit on with a pretty girl when you see something you want. Have some fun, no strings attached. That's what I'm doing here. But it's another thing entirely to strap that dynamite around your neck and light the fuse. We've been mates a long time.
That was Liam, the edge in his normally soft voice, evident even to Allie.
And I control my temper these days. That's why I'm giving you fair warning. Shut up about Kristen. You're wrong, and you're out of line. And as for you, well, I'm sorry for you, Toro. That's all I'll say.
She'd had with this kind of dating practically had been the prom. Devon was a whole lot better looking than any boy she'd known in high school, though, and her body was letting her know fairly insistently that she hadn't had sex for months. Some fun times, maybe even a real relationship with a handsome Kiwi, she'd already decided, would be the perfect addition to her year abroad. She told herself the first day that it was too soon for him to call, that he wouldn't want to seem that eager, and when that day had passed, she told herself that, well, it was still only Thursday. But when Friday came, and he still hadn't called, she looped back through their evening together, wondering if she'd misread his signals, especially when he'd flattered her by asking her opinion of the PR he was doing for the Heat.
Oh, we're just not getting the traction we should, he sighed. The games are televised on Sky Sport right enough, but we aren't getting the viewership numbers from women or men that we'd projected. The time should be right for women's sport, but somehow we aren't quite where we'd like to be. What do you think? Any bright ideas?
I did look up the team online, she admitted, and saw the news stories and so forth. It could be this is just me, but it seems like a lot of what you've done is more soft news, fluffy, you know?
Fluffy?
He said slowly. I'm not being critical, she went on quickly, just giving you my impressions.
No, please, he insisted. Tell me.
Well, I didn't see a lot of emphasis on them as athletes, she said. It all seemed to be almost glamour pieces, and I thought you said you were trying to get the sport taken more seriously.
We are,
he said immediately. Well, first thing I'd say, maybe stop having them play in little dresses, she said with a laugh, because that just screams girly non-sport, doesn't it? But you probably can't do anything about that. So maybe show them in the gym, training, taking part in clinics with schoolgirls, things like that. Emphasizing their skills, even their personalities, as long as it's their drive, their athleticism you're talking about. Focusing less on their looks and their personal lives. Because even though netball's so resolutely non-contact, she added, which, along with those dresses, does make it seem a little girly to me, I can tell they do have skills. But it's almost like you're scared to show that. Now she wondered, had that been too blunt? Nate had commented on that aspect of her personality, after all. Even Kristen had, and Kristen rarely said an unkind word about anybody. Allie knew she was pretty direct by North American standards, and in polite New Zealand, she was beginning to realize, she might well qualify as downright abrasive. Had Devon resented her criticism? He hadn't seemed to at the time. But even though it had seemed like he'd enjoyed himself too, and he'd appeared even more interested than before, the week turned into the weekend without another word, not even a text. So she snatched at her mobile when she saw his name come up on it as she sat eating a late breakfast with Kristen on Saturday. "Hi," she said happily, seeing Kristen's eyes sharpen on her across the table. Too bad she was working late tonight, Allie thought quickly. She'd have liked to have dinner with him, and that was probably what he was calling to ask about. To her surprise, though, it wasn't. "I
was wondering," he said instead, "if you and Kristen would like to go to the city market with me tomorrow morning. Do some food shopping, have a look around, bit of breakfast. It's a nice outing, and I'd love to talk to both of you before the event next week. Get any last-minute thoughts."
Hang on. Allie felt the disappointment rise. Did he really want to go out with Kristen then? Was he thinking he could somehow switch roommates? Good luck with that. Kristen wouldn't do it even if she liked him. Or maybe Allie actually had offended him. No, that couldn't be it, or why would he be asking her out again at all? She gave up on the speculation, pressed the phone against her chest. "Want to go to breakfast with Devin and me tomorrow?" she asked Kristen. "He's invited both of us." Kristen was shaking her head vehemently. "You're busy," she hissed. "Say, 'Sorry, I'm busy.'" "What? I'm not, though," Allie whispered back. "I want to go. Do you?" Kristen shook her head again. Allie shrugged, put the phone back to her ear. "Kristen's busy," she told Devin, "but I'd love to go." "Why?" she asked Kristen, when she'd hung up after making plans to meet Devin near the market the following morning. "He's calling you Saturday, for Sunday morning," Kristen pointed out, "after not calling for days." "So?" "So he's telling you you're not important," Kristen insisted, giving himself the upper hand because he knows you've been waiting to hear from him. Now he knows he doesn't have to bother to call in advance or hide the fact that you're not the one he's taking out on Saturday night. He's not even coming to pick you up. "Maybe he's broke, like me," Allie protested. "Maybe breakfast is all he can afford." "Then why couldn't he have called you a couple days ago to schedule it?" Allie shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe he's been busy. Or maybe he's more spontaneous. Also like me. Anyway, I can't play those kinds of dating games." "Okay," Kristen sighed. "But I have a feeling he can." "So, sport," Devin said, when the two of them were perched on tall stools in a seating alcove behind the city market on Sunday, drinking coffee and eating an assortment of delicious items, from tiny dumplings filled with chopped prawns and fresh ginger to an almond croissant from the French bakery table that had Allie's eyes almost crossing with food lust on her first bite. "So," she said, smiling back at him and taking another bite of croissant. "Oh, yeah, just as good the second time." "Sport." "Huh? Couldn't even be bothered to drive me home." "You know what they call that?" Kristen said. "Get in, get off, get out. Except he was making you get out, which is even worse." "So what was the point in taking me out? If he didn't want any more than that?" "That he could," Kristen explained. "Guys like that, they think the first time's the best, because they got you, because they won, and then they get to throw you away, and that's even more of a win." "But the first time, it's not even that great," Allie protested. "Like I said." "Bet it was for him, though," Kristen said. "I'll bet he had an orgasm, and that'll be all he cared about." So that was her love life, crashing and burning, and her big career move had been just about that successful, too. Oh, she'd worked hard enough on the Heat event, but Mac hadn't ever acknowledged her part in making it happen, the fact that so much of it had been her idea in the first place, not to mention everything she had contributed to make it a success. And when she'd suggested holding a women's climbing clinic to build on the publicity they'd been receiving, bringing more women into the gym, Mac had brushed her off. With all that, Allie's normal cheerful spirits were dampened over the next few days. Her suspicion had been correct. Devin hadn't called her again. Well, she didn't want him to, did she? It wasn't him she was regretting, anyway. It was having to face that she'd been a fool, that everyone had been right. Kristen, whom she'd had to admit, felt a bit superior to. And worst of all, Nate. Whatever the true story was between the two of them, she suspected she hadn't heard it yet. Because, she realized, Nate had never told her. Devin had been quick enough to trash Nate to her, but other than letting her know that he didn't like the other man, Nate had never reciprocated. Eventually, though, she got tired of beating herself up. She knew. It was probably willpower that was forcing him up that high wall. But willpower, she suspected, was something that he had plenty of. Good to go, she told another pair a few minutes later, then stood back and watched another fit young male body make its way up the wall. Keep that rope a bit tighter, she told the man belaying. You want it pretty taut.
Sorry about that, earlier.
She heard the voice behind her shoulder, didn't turn from her supervisory post.
I know you'd rather not have done that.
She stepped a pace away from the belayer and spoke quietly, still without looking at him. You can't always get what you want, I suppose. She could hear his sigh.
I said I was sorry. Not sure what else to say.
Nothing else to say. It's done. No big deal.
It is, though. I wanted to say today. I wanted to...
What? She asked in exasperation. She shot a quick glance at him. Why did his hair have to be so messy? Why did he have to have stubble again and look like he just got out of bed? It was so totally unfair. She turned hastily back to her climber again. Good job, she called up. Move your left leg up a little, to the left. She kept watching, made sure he was all right. Why are you here, anyway? She couldn't resist asking Nate. I didn't think you were training yet.
Ready to get back into it, that's all, he said. And I wanted to come today.
Nate, came the welcome interruption from behind them, just when Allie was softening. The PR, Simon again.
Could we get you holding the rope for somebody? Belaying,
Nate said.
Yeah, half a mo.
Allie glanced at him again, could see him hesitating. Then he shrugged, went to where his teammate stood waiting, and clipped in. And that was the last time she spoke to him. A lesson for Nate. Oh no, Allie exclaimed involuntarily, a week after the Hurricanes event, looking over the day's schedule when she got into work. Right there in the last block under her name. Lesson. N. Torrance. At 5 o'clock, the last hour of her shift. Robbo was there, looking over her shoulder.
You may not like Captain Fantastic, he said with a grin, but I think he likes you. Don't know why, you're so bloody standoffish. Must be a case of treat him mean, keep him keen.
I do not treat him mean, she muttered. No meaner than he deserves. He's a jerk.
Didn't seem like one to me, Robbo said. Typical Kiwi, I thought. Polite, humble, modest, all those boring Kiwi things.
Trust me, I know him a lot better than you do, and he's a jerk. Why? She was asking Nate the moment he got close enough. She was standing near the front desk, body language spelling tension at the sight of him. He sighed inwardly. He hadn't made any progress the other day after all, and he'd have his work cut out for him today.
Because I want to learn to climb, he said, and you're a good teacher.
She continued to stare at him, a hint of temper in the dark eyes.
All right, he admitted, because I wanted to see you again, and this was the only way I could think of to do it.
But you're in the middle of training. You're getting plenty of workouts. It isn't good for you, she said, then snapped her mouth shut, as if she didn't want to be caught being concerned about him. He shrugged.
This was stretching, and something different for my body. I've had a long break, and I'm fit. And, he added, glancing pointedly at the clock on the wall, I've paid for my hour. So come on, teach me.
And that isn't going to bother you, she challenged. My telling you what to do.
Did I seem bothered last week?
I don't know. I was trying not to look at you, she admitted, and he was startled into a laugh. All right, then, she finally said. Let's get you a harness and shoes. He lifted the black Adidas bag he was carrying.
Bought them already, and a chalk bag and chalk. Got it all right here.
You're really serious about this, then, she said in surprise.
He was serious about something, all right, even if it wasn't climbing. But he wasn't sharing that, not while she was this wary. He did his best during the lesson that followed, to listen to her, do exactly what she said. "Use your legs more," she instructed from beneath him. Where she was belaying him, he reminded his monkey mind, which insisted on telling him that he was in danger. "Right arm, left leg. Left arm, right leg. Don't let your arms get way up above you, so you wear yourself out pulling yourself up." And even though he didn't like this much more than he had the first time, he held on grimly and obeyed. "Damn," he said after half an hour, on the ground again to his everlasting relief and flexing his fingers. "My hands are cramping up." "That can be one of the tougher things," she agreed, "especially for someone as strong as you. It won't be your arms or legs, or even your core in your case, that'll limit you. It's your tendons and the small muscles in your hands, the things you probably don't use as much in rugby. You may not want to overdo it today. You don't want to strain something in there." "You're right," he decided. "My hands are pretty important to me. But do you have some exercises I could do, maybe? A way to get my fingers stronger? Wouldn't be a bad thing in any case." She looked at him in surprise. "Well, climbing's probably the best thing, if you're serious about this. But I could loan you a little contraption I have, where you squeeze with one finger into your mentality." "Not so different from NZ, then." "You're right, that's occurred to me more than once since I've been here. Lots of open space, lots of outdoor activities. But more ocean here, and you have better weather." She smiled at him. "Now you've got me doing it." He smiled back, but persisted. "Surprised you didn't stay there then, since outdoor activities are what you do." "There seem like more opportunities in the U.S., she explained. "My parents thought so too. And of course, the relationship I was in, that's another reason why I stayed in the Bay Area. Besides, I didn't think at the time that I was going to do this kind of thing, the outdoor stuff, as a career. I just thought it was fun, and it turns out that I've never wanted to do anything else. And I want—" She stopped herself. "I thought it was fun," she repeated. "What? What do you want to do?" he pressed. "Never mind. You don't want to hear about my hopes and dreams." "I do, though. But we can save it for next time, if you'd rather. Conversational topic, eh?" Yeah, right. She was going to confide her ridiculous career ambitions to somebody who achieved the pinnacle of his about the time he was in his late 20s. "So?" he prompted. "Calgary." She shrugged. "It has a huge statue of a bull in the middle of it. That's about all you need to know. That pretty much sums it up. How about if we talk about you instead?" He had to be a more interesting topic than her unexciting childhood. She might not know much about dating, but she had a feeling it was better not to actually bore the guy to tears. Besides, you were supposed to ask them about themselves, weren't you? "Hannah told me that lots of New Zealand rugby players play their whole careers for the team closest to where they're from," she went on. "Drew's only played for the Blues, I know, which surprised me because U.S. athletes move around a lot. Every year or two sometimes, I think. There's usually no local connection at all, which makes it a little harder, I think." She mused. "Found the right job for you. How much rugby do you think I watch?" "Heaps." "But you probably have to do that," she said, moving back toward the windows of that shoe shop, all the same, as if irresistibly drawn there. "I'd do it anyway, because I love footy, just like you love fishing. It's work, and it's fun. Neither of us is performing brain surgery here, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with what we do, or what we love." They were in front of the shop now. Mi piaci, he saw. Shoes. "Which do you like best? Those purple ones?" he suggested, pointing to a pair of high suede heels. "They'd go with those lace things you were wearing at Toro's party, eh?" She said dubiously. "I probably wouldn't do that. Too matchy-matchy." "Really? I thought matching was the point." "It makes an outfit a little boring," she explained. "It's a lot more fun to have a little surprise, a little contrast, a little funk."
"So which of these would be a better choice? What would be funky?"
she considered, studying the colorful array in the window, then nodding with decision and pointing. Those. Yeah, those would be super fun.
Right, let's go then,
he said, indicating the shop door. What? She laughed. You mean try them on?
Well, not me, he said with a grin of his own. I was thinking you. Why not? You have something better to do today?
No, she said slowly. If you're sure you want to.
I'm sure.
Watching Kristen put shoes on and take them off, he thought a few minutes later, as she slipped the studded, buckled, motorcycle-inspired black boots on, stood, and walked to the mirror with that unconscious sway that came from a body put together absolutely perfectly. Well, it wasn't the very best thing he could imagine, but it wasn't too far off. He waited while she took the snap, then asked,
What is she? 8 months or so?
7, her mother confirmed.
Got a tooth coming in, too.
He peered into the little mouth, while the baby favored him with a beaming smile, featuring one tiny dot of ivory on the bottom.
I've got a niece a bit older than this,
he told the mum, handing the little girl back.
She's been dead slow on the teething, though. Still got a mouthful of gum.
I'm almost wishing Eva didn't have any either, the mum sighed. Been making her right fussy these past couple days.
Have you tried a frozen bagel? He asked. One of those little ones? The taste keeps them sucking it longer than those rings. And the freezing helps. It's a bit messy, but well worth it.
I'll try that, and I'll let you get back to your lunch. Cheers for the photo.
That's all right. What?
He asked Kristen in surprise. She was sitting over there laughing at him. Better than the withdrawal he'd sensed earlier, he supposed.
What's funny?
Let's see, she said, still smiling. You go shoe shopping with me. You hold babies and you talk about teething. If you suggested we watch The Notebook together because it's your favorite movie and you need a good cry, I'm going to know you're just trying to impress me.
Oi.
He did his best to sound pained.
I'm actually a pretty sentimental fella. I'm Mary. We're romantic, haven't you heard? That's our specialty.
I thought that was war. Or maybe rugby.
All of the above. Or, could be I'm a secret cross-dresser, using you as a decoy, eh? Could be popping back into that shop later on the sly, asking if they've got those shoes in a 13. Though I'd probably go the purple ones myself.
I guess I'll worry when you encourage me to shop for lingerie, she said.
When I encourage you to shop for lingerie, he couldn't help saying, it won't be because I want to wear it. That's a promise.
Sharing another beer with Nate. Pretty good, Nate thought on Monday. He'd even talked Allie into a beer at the brew pub this time. And she'd smiled, looked happy to see him, instead of nervous when he'd arrived at the gym tonight, the last thing on her schedule as always. Getting better every time, and it was only lesson 3. I've got a question for you, she said, smiling her thanks at the server, who'd just set down her glass. I got so distracted last time by the sheep and bulls.
Not to mention the trout, he put in. Don't forget the trout.
And the trout, she agreed, that I didn't think to ask you the obvious question. Why are you in Wellington? I looked it up, and there's a rugby team down there, near where you're from. Not in Southland, but in, however you pronounce it. Why don't you play for them?
Otago? Yeah, the Highlanders, in Dunedin, which is a lovely city. No, really, he protested at her skeptical look. I'm not just saying that because I realised, belatedly, that I'm not meant to be slagging off the sheep of my homeland, let alone the farmers, he said with a shudder. Got a bit too relaxed there, I'm afraid.
You don't have to watch yourself, she said. I'm not going to tell anybody that you aren't the perfect New Zealand ambassador. You can be honest with me. Heaven knows I have been with you.
Cheers for that,
he said with real relief. She seemed to understand, to his surprise. Well, she did know Drew and Hannah, but Drew never put a foot wrong, he thought glumly. You'd never catch Drew making a disparaging remark about farm days. More likely to see him riding the tractor to open the show, and looking as if life could offer nothing finer. Anyway, she persisted, why Wellington? Was it too much of the sheep and cows? Because I have to say, you don't strike me as that much of an urban animal.
Nah, I'm not really. I like being out in the bush as much as any other Kiwi joker. But I do like Welly, he said hastily.
Big cantaloupes ripe? How often do you think that works? He laughed, and she realized all at once how much she'd come to enjoy being with him. That sitting across from him at an umbrella-shaded table in the pub's busy outdoor seating area, the cold beer sliding down her throat, the relaxed crowd around them, in a festive summer Friday afternoon mood, the blue sea sparkling just a few meters away, was so very much the best thing about today. When had that happened? And looking at him, the way he was sitting back, one arm hooked over the back of the chair, showing off all that bicep, the vertical ridges of muscle down his forearm, the other sinewy, oversized hand caressing his beer glass in a way that had riveted her when she'd first noticed it, then made her look hastily elsewhere. His amused gaze on her, the smile that cocked up at one side of his mouth.
No idea,
he said, and she had to wrench her mind back to recall what they were talking about.
Never thought of that one.
Yeah, she said, smiling at him in her turn, seeing his gaze sharpen, watching him sit up a little straighter. Because you don't have to.
Well, not so far, he admitted. Never done much lurking around the veggie aisle anyway.
I'll bet you haven't. Even if he hadn't been a rugby player. But since he was, nope, he wouldn't have been resorting to the grocery store. But for normal men, men who aren't you, she went on, forcing herself to keep to the topic. A climbing gym, that's just tailor-made as a place to meet women. Or for women to meet men, for that matter, since you need a partner to do anything but bouldering. What better way to get to know somebody? She gets used to seeing you around, you offer to belay her, start a little chat, ask if she wants to meet you there again tomorrow.
It'd work, he agreed. Least, I'm hoping it does.
And people look more attractive doing athletic things, right? He said with a smile at the women. I didn't even think about it yesterday, that you had a game today, she said, feeling guilty. Why hadn't she asked him more about his own work, his preparations for the rugby season? Because he always seemed to have it so together, that was why. Because, in that aspect of himself, he was so formidable. Easier to tease him about climbing, enjoy flirting with him, watching his eyes on her, thinking about having sex with him, which is what she was doing again right now, in front of his mother. So, you two are up here for the game. She turned hastily to the women, catching another meaningful glance being exchanged. From Gore? Did you just get in? Last night, Georgia explained. I came from Gore, but Lil's in Dunedin.
The metropolis,
Nate put in. Nate told me Dunedin was beautiful, Allie said. She wouldn't share what he'd said about Gore, or ask how the sheep statue was doing. How long are you staying? Oh, just the weekend, Georgia said. We'll be off again Monday. Frank can't do without me much longer than that, not with the calves and all.
My family are dairy farmers, Nate explained. Dad and Ned, my brother. That's why I became a rugby player. Get out of working so hard, eh?
Oh. That required a bit of mental readjustment. Then, coming up here really is a treat, Allie said to Georgia, if it's a busy time at home. Oh, yes, it is, Georgia agreed. You know, until Nate moved here, I'd only been away from the mainland a handful of times in my life, and now I've been all over the world, haven't I, darling? Thanks to you.
Well, a bit of it anyway,
Nate said with a smile.
Mostly the European bit. Seen more of it than me, anyway. If anyone wants a guidebook written about airports and rugby stadiums, though, I reckon I'm the man to do it.
Who had moved to stand in her starting position. Anna held up a hand, counted silently to 5, finger by finger. Up went her pinky, and she pointed at the stage. And Kristen went. And finally, doesn't everybody love a beautiful bride? the announcer asked with a flourish. Applause rang out as she went on, describing the designer gown in loving detail. Kristen looked straight ahead, placed each high-heeled foot down with precision, and glided to the end of the runway. Since she was here, she'd do her best. She had done this before. It was a beautiful dress, and she looked good in it. It was hard not to get a little thrill from the attention, too, knowing she was performing well. She got to the end of the raised platform, looked down, and swept the crowd with her best smile as she pivoted, showed her stuff. And that was when she saw them. 4 big, solid figures, incongruous in the crowd of women, seated in the front row near the end of the runway in their sober suits, white dress shirts and ties. Of course, it was a charity event in Wellington, and the hurricanes were here. But not just any hurricanes, because one of them was Liam. Liam saw the moment when she noticed him. He smiled back at her and wondered why her own smile wobbled. Because she was absolutely gorgeous, fully made up, the golden hair pulled straight back from her forehead and confined in a severe knot that only emphasized the perfection of her bone structure. And then there was the dress. An elegantly strapless, form-fitting ivory gown of some kind of textured material that followed her curves from the tops of her breasts to the strongly defined indentation of her waist, caressed the swell of her hips, then frothed out below her knees. Why hadn't she told him she was doing this? Had she thought he'd think she was, well, only the straight ones, she couldn't help pointing out, which cut it down a fair amount. It was a fashion show, Liam. He smiled a bit at that, although she could tell the smile was offered reluctantly.
I didn't like my teammates seeing it,
he admitted.
But that wasn't all. It was that you did it at all, because you can't tell me you wanted to.
She looked down then, picked up her gym bag and set it on her lap, wrapped her arms around it and hugged it to her, just for something to hold on to. I didn't, she admitted, still not looking at him. I wouldn't have minded doing the regular clothes. Well, I didn't even want to do those. Not really. And I really didn't want to do that.
Then why did you?
He pressed. Because, she sighed. Because when I said no at first, everyone thought it was just me being a snotty American again. I could tell. That I didn't want to help. That I thought I was too good for them. Too,
Too good-looking,
he suggested.
Entitled?
Yeah, that I was stuck on myself. So I had to say yes, don't you see? He was silent for a few moments, and she waited for him to speak, hating that she cared so much, that she was letting him judge her, and at the same time wanted him to understand.
So,
he said at last,
your choice was, do something that made you uncomfortable, but other people wanted you to do, or say no and make them angry.
Yes, she said with relief. That was it.
You decided,
he said,
that you'd rather disappoint yourself than disappoint anyone else. Yes, you were,
he said with a smile of his own.
And I'd just like to say for the record here, I'd love to see every bit of it again, as long as you were only showing it to me.
His expression grew serious again.
You're a beautiful woman, Kristen, he said. That doesn't give anyone rights to you. Just because they want a piece of you, it doesn't mean you have to give it to them. Because that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
Yes, she sighed. That's it. That I'm always having to prove that I'm a regular person, to go out of my way to do it, or they'll assume that I think I'm, what you said, entitled. He nodded.
I know, because I get that too. Not so much for my pretty face, oddly enough,
he said, making her smile this time.
But being a footy player, being recognised.
Being a celebrity.
Yeah.
You got it.
Everybody's made some mistakes, he said. I'm sure if you asked her, Hannah'd tell you about the ones she made. May not have been as spectacular as yours, but I'd imagine they're there all the same. All you can do, all anyone can do, is stop making the same ones over and over. And that's exactly what you're doing.
She sat for a minute, absorbing what he'd said, realizing that he was right.
And do you want to climb now?
He asked with a smile that went straight to her wounded heart.
Or would you rather go straight on to dinner?
Climb, she said with decision. Please. And then go to dinner with you. She reached out impulsively for him, felt him stiffen for a moment before he wrapped those big arms around her, pulled her close, and being held by him, resting against the solidity and the strength of him, felt just as good as she'd always known it would. She relaxed into him for a few comforting seconds, his cheek warm against hers, then released him and sat back again. Sorry, she said, feeling the prick of tears. I just needed a hug.
No worries, he said, though I'm beginning to think you were put on this earth to test my self-control. It's been a hell of a struggle to get it, but that's nothing to how hard it is to hold on to it when I'm with you.
A timid man.
Here we are,
Nate announced, arriving at the gym's front desk on Saturday afternoon and finding Allie, as always, waiting for him, ready for him.
My final lesson. Do I get a bit of a ceremony here? A lovely wee certificate naming me most improved, which means, as we all know, that I was rubbish at the start, and yet I'm still here. But maybe not quite such rubbish.
Allie walked to Nate's car with him, feeling as if her head were spinning. She'd hoped that today would go something like this, but now that it was happening, she was definitely nervous. A feeling that wasn't helped at all by the sight of the man approaching on the busy Saturday evening pavement. Devon. It wasn't the first time she'd seen him. Wellington was too small, too centralized, too pedestrian-friendly to avoid him. All good things, except when you really didn't want to run into somebody. She normally either pretended she didn't see him, if that was feasible, or gave him a curt nod, while he, on the other hand, always looked perfectly comfortable at seeing her. Well, he was probably used to seeing his one-night stands on the street. She'd bet there had been a lot of them. But seeing him there when she was with Nate... She felt Nate stiffen beside her, and knew he'd seen Devon too. And, to her surprise, Devon didn't look comfortable. Not this time. He glanced between the two of them, his expression hardening. And Allie was glad to see it. She hoped it made him sweat, thinking about her with Nate. She looked straight back at him, sent the message as hard as she could. He's bigger and better than you, in every single way. She'd bet it was true, too. Nate glanced down at her, but she kept walking, speeded up if anything, averted her gaze now, with her best look of contempt, and walked right on by. Nate didn't say anything until he'd opened the car door for her, put her bag, which he'd insisted on carrying, into the back seat with his own, and climbed in on his side, until they were driving over the hill to Arrow Valley. At last, though, he spoke, seeming to choose his words carefully.
You don't have to ignore him for my sake, he said. I don't like him, that's no secret, but I know you do, and...
Okay, she said, wishing her voice sounded stronger. I see why you don't like him. And she made a helpless gesture. Thanks for the coffees and the beer and everything. I'll see you. She reached back for her bag, got out of the car, walked hurriedly to the front door, pulling out her keys with eyes that were blurred by tears. It wasn't enough that Devon had seduced her, she thought, the old-fashioned word seeming like the only appropriate one. Now he'd wrecked things with Nate, too. And she liked Nate. She liked him so much.
Ellie.
He was beside her, his hand on her arm.
Wait.
It's okay. She shook his hand off, got the key into the door. I know it seems awkward, but it doesn't matter. Better you found out now.
It does matter,
he insisted.
And I'm not going to let you go. Not till we talk this over.
Then come upstairs, she sighed. She didn't have to worry that he'd jump her after all. Not anymore. All her caution seemed ridiculous now anyway. There was only one good guy in this scenario, and it was pretty obvious which one he was. How could she have got it so backwards? He didn't try to talk to her until they were in her flat. Kristen wasn't home, Allie registered briefly. Out with Liam, she supposed. Kristen wasn't reading guys wrong. She'd been right about both Nate and Devon all along. Sit down, she told Nate now, gesturing to the couch. Do you want a beer or something? I think we have some. He waved a hand. Nah. He waited until she was seated beside him, then began to speak, sitting forward in his typical pose, legs apart, elbow, a good long look at the sight of her walking away. I don't have 2 days off. I have to work tomorrow afternoon, and close, too, which means I'm there till 9.
Then we'll have to make the hours count, won't we? He decided. And I've just realised that I need another climbing lesson after all. Last thing tomorrow.
Men's Valentine's Day. Now I know what your mom meant. Allie sighed the next evening, just before taking another enthusiastic bite of Thai takeaway. She wriggled back against the headboard a little more, lifted her plate from her lap so she could cross her bare legs. At least she was wearing underwear and a camisole now. Dressed for dinner. That shocked a laugh out of Nate, sitting back himself in nothing but a pair of warm-up pants, making short work of his beef and vegetables.
I'm almost scared to ask. This scene isn't something I'd really associate with my mum.
When was that your aunt? Was talking about how much you spoil them, she explained.
Oh yeah, buying your Thai food, that's a major. I'd better watch myself here, setting this kind of standard.
Okay, but giving me a ride home this morning, then waiting while I packed so you could drive me to work? That's a lot of spoiling, admit it. And then coming to get me again tonight.
Because I needed my lesson, is what that was. Needed to give you a bit of a lesson too. Even things out a little.
She said happily. It had been awfully nice to see him come through the door tonight. To see him smile at her. To smile back at him. And to think, that's mine. He's here for me. To want him so much, and know that he wanted her just as badly. To spend the hour climbing with him, teasing him, laughing with him, all the while knowing that they were going to end up here. And then what had happened when they actually had ended up here? They'd had to reheat their takeaway after what she'd intended as a quick shower had turned out much soapier than anticipated. They'd started in there, continued out here, in bed, and on the floor. The floor had been especially special. You know what's extra nice? She went on. I was feeling kind of bad a couple weeks ago that I wasn't going to have a boyfriend for Valentine's Day. Not that anybody's ever done much for me on Valentine's Day, but at least I didn't have that feeling that I was the only leprous, unloved person on the planet. Know what I mean?
Don't think men get that feeling, he said with a smile. We're a bit late here, but I could nip down to the shop and buy you a card. Half price even, which would mean I could probably do the chockies too. They'd still have them up in that bargain bin.
She laughed. No thanks. She leaned over and kissed the top of his shoulder, loving the fact that she could do it.
I was just thinking that I sort of got a Valentine after all, and that it's nice. But maybe you want a card since you missed it too, and as you've pointed out, they're cheap now.
Well, you know what they say about Valentine's Day and men.
No? What?
It's a woman's holiday. We don't really care. I read online somewhere that some bloke proposed that they have one just for men. Maybe the next month. This month, in case you want to do a bit of planning.
Uh-huh, she said skeptically. I can't wait. What do men want for Valentine's Day? Not candy and flowers, I take it.
Nah, what this bloke was saying was, beer, steak, and oral sex. Men's Valentine's Day. Easy as.
Wow, that's so romantic, she breathed, eyes wide in mock admiration. I'll just point out here that you're drinking a beer right now, and you had a steak last night. And you got the other part tonight, too. I'm pretty much 3 for 3.
Yeah, he grinned. Every day's
into the squad this season to take the place of a player leaving, as so many were now, for the bright lights and bigger paychecks to be had in the Northern Hemisphere.
Thought he did a good job of creating space against the Chiefs. Not easy to do against them. Good in support, too. Got good instincts, fast to react. He'll do all right. Agreed, Nigel said. But? Well, you know what it is, Nate said. It's how dodgy the back line is. Still. Especially Manny turning up unfit. We'll have to make sure we don't commit too many to the breakdown. So we've got more flexibility on defence. Need to keep the pressure off at the back, because they're not up to it.
They both looked gloomily at the big left wing. Nate closed his mouth on any further expression of disgust at the extra 5 or 6 kilos Manny was still carrying, so obviously slowing him down, depriving him of the explosive burst that was the essence of a quality winger. Nate had never understood how a player could let himself slide like that during his time off, jeopardize his and the team's season. All right, he knew it was harder for the Samoan and Maori boys. Time spent with big, loving families, family gatherings centered around food, frames that packed on fat as easily as they added muscle. But they knew it too, and it was part of the discipline of playing this sport at its highest level. You turned up fit, and that was that. If you weren't willing to do what needed to be done, everything that needed to be done, everything the game asked of you, you didn't deserve to be out there. He could have added a comment about the patchy form from their starting fullback, his lack so far of the flashes of brilliance he'd shown in the previous season, the fact that the stretches of mediocrity in between seemed to be increasing, the tackles he'd missed the previous week, the kick that had been charged down and returned for the Chiefs' try that had won the other team the game. Yeah, he could have said all that. It feels stupid, though, she muttered. She put her bag down, reached for her ponytail with both hands, and pulled it tight. Uh-oh. Tell me, he commanded, fixing her with his best captain's stare. We're not going anywhere till you do. It's just... She shrugged, looked out at the harbor. I thought you'd text me or something about the plan. Call me, maybe. Something. Since it's only our second time together. It's like you did it, you got there, and now you're done. Done? He repeated. What do you mean, done? I'm not done. Here I am, waiting to take you home with me. Not a bit done. Done courting me, I guess, she said, and he could see how uncomfortable this was making her. I don't expect, flowers or anything, but maybe... She trailed off. Maybe a text saying, I don't know, see you tonight, like that. We calendared it, though, he repeated in confusion. We agreed. Well, I need more than that, okay? She was showing some exasperation now. I'm not high maintenance. At least, I've never thought of myself that way. But you started sleeping with me, 5 days ago? It'd be nice if I still felt a little bit special, Like
you were looking forward to seeing me.
Special?
He said slowly. Yeah, she muttered. Special. I'm a girl. Sue me.
Right,
He said, the light dawning.
right.
He took her hand, turned her to face him, waited until she was looking at him.
I've been looking forward to tonight, he told her. The past couple days have been pretty stressful.
What does it look like on there? She asked. Just how hard is it to squeeze me in? He swiveled the laptop, showed her the spaces, most of them filled. What are these Auckland trips? She asked. Something to do with the All Blacks?
Sponsorship things, media things, he explained. One for the All Blacks, one personal one this week.
So next Wednesday, she said slowly, you've got training until noon, then an autograph signing session with the team, and then you fly to Auckland for a couple hours for a TV interview? She looked up, got the confirming nod. And then you're back here again in the evening and training again Thursday morning. Wow, you are busy. She clicked again, glanced at him, startled, clicked some more, and looked at him again.
What?
He asked.
What is it?
What had her looking like that? He tried to remember if she could be seeing anything dodgy on his calendar. No, not possible, because there wasn't anything. Allie D., she read. Sunday night. And I'm on there for the next day, too, until 1. All nicely filled in. And down here, she clicked again, on Thursday we have Allie S. She looked at him, the dark brows drawing down a little over the brown eyes, and he could almost feel himself squirm. I'm guessing, she said slowly, that Allie D. means you're having dinner with me.
Yeah,
he said with relief.
that'd be it.
No Allie B. in either place, she pointed out. Presumably you think you can remember we'll have breakfast.
Hey,
he said again with a smile. And, she went on inexorably, Allie S., don't tell me, please don't tell me that you're calendaring sex with me.
Oh, when you put it like that, he protested, it sounds bad.
Well, yeah, it does. She shoved the laptop back towards him. What is it, a haircut? Are you telling me that unless it's on your calendar you won't remember? That you can't hold that thought in your brain?
No, it's not that,
he tried to explain.
Just that there's a lot to do and I can't afford to forget, so I put down as much as possible. It's just a habit.
Well, unless you take that S away, she informed him, you aren't going to have to calendar it because it's not going to be happening.
Jeez,
he muttered, grabbing the laptop from her and pressing delete over the offending character.
I'd like to play the Allie being quiet and obedient role-playing game. When am I getting that one?
He'd meant it as a joke, but found himself getting a little jolt at the thought. Looked at her, saw the shudder, her surefire sign of arousal. That had got her going, too, had it? She said with a sigh, clearly reading his mind, as he continued to look at her. You probably could get that one. I seem to be pretty easy, sorry to say. I'm guessing that all you'd need to do would be to play the Nate being an attentive boyfriend game, and I'd go for it. What are you doing? She asked, as he began to type furiously again.
Calendaring the text I'm going to be sending you this week, and reminding myself to make another Logan Brown booking for Sunday. We didn't finish dinner last time, eh?
And you want to make sure you get to eat all of your steak. Nate.
Nah,
he said.
I want to tell you to leave your dinner this time, so we can play that game.
Riding the roller coaster. You really did book us in here again, Allie said with pleasure, as Nate pulled the car to the curb outside Logan Brown a week later, where the valet came forward to meet them.
What?
Nate asked in surprise. Solid wood, and looked at her, standing in the middle of the entryway.
Take off your clothes, he told her. Everything but the shoes. Leave those on.
She did as he told her, dropping one piece at a time at her feet, until she was standing before him, naked.
Yeah, he said. That's good. That's what I want. Now walk upstairs to my bedroom.
He wasn't taking off his clothes? They were still moving up the hill, and she wasn't sure she could stand the anticipation. She turned and obeyed his instruction, and could feel his gaze on her as they began to climb, then jumped with surprise, came to a halt when his hand closed around one cheek, began to rub.
Keep walking, he told her. Will I feel this?
She shuddered a little. He had the other hand over her breast now, was caressing her in both places, pressed against her, climbing right behind her. And then they were at the top of the stairs, and she came to a stop, every part of her quivering.
Keep going. My bedroom, he prompted.
She shivered again, walked into the center of the room, and stopped again, because he was right behind her, and he had both hands on her, one in front, the other moving in from behind, and those hands were merciless. Her breath was coming hard, and she was rocking in the high heels. She could feel him behind her, pressed into her, and she wanted him so much it hurt. He didn't stop until she was nearly there. Then he took both hands from her abruptly, forcing a little gasp from her at the loss. He was turning her around, bending to kiss her, his hands gripping her behind, pulling her up on tiptoe, rubbing her over. Control, sadly overrated. Allie awoke early on Sunday morning, stole quietly out of the bedroom. Nate was still sleeping, but she was feeling so energized she had to move. It had rained on and off all throughout the previous day, and she'd woken at night to hear more of it, drumming hard on the roof of the batch. Perfect weather to stay indoors and be Nate's sex slave, she thought with a happy shiver of remembrance, as she stepped off the porch and ran across the road to reach the break in the dunes that offered access to the beach on the other side. Today the clouds had parted, the sun was shining, even if not warmly, and she was on the kilometers-long deserted stretch of beach, feeling like the only person in the world. She kicked off her jandals, chose a direction at random, and began to walk. And when that wasn't enough to release her fizzing spirits, began to run. The sand was firm under her feet near the edge of the surf, and when a lone wave came up higher on the beach, she didn't run away from it. She embraced it, letting the cold water wash over her feet and ankles, glad she had worn her shorts, so she was free to play. She turned at last, began to run back the way she'd come. Still nobody else around, she saw with pleasure. None of the little town's few hundred residents fancying an early morning beach walk. She ran past the spot where she'd entered, then gradually slowed, put her head back into the wind, listened to the pounding of the surf, stretched her arms wide, and twirled. Around and around, feeling 6 years old again, able to surrender herself completely to the magic of the moment. She took a final spin and saw Nate coming through the break in the dunes towards her. She waved at him, an extravagant gesture, her arms sweeping above her head, laughed out loud, embroidered with his name, the date and the venue, and, above all else, with a silver fern he wore over his heart. She stood with the rest of the crowd for the singing of the anthems. Not much more emotion rising inside at the intensity on the players' faces, while the singer performed the New Zealand anthem, first in Maori, then in English, and most of them sang along. She'd known that it had mattered. She hadn't realized how much. She started to sit down again once the applause died down, and then stopped, because nobody else was. Instead, the stadium was humming,
then erupting in a low roar as the All Blacks formed up in rows, the French making a line of their own to face them, hands around each other's shoulders. But Allie wasn't watching the French team, because one figure in black was pacing behind the front row now, beginning to shout out instructions in Maori. Liam, she registered, as the rest of the men dropped into a crouch and began to slap their thighs and to chant. This was the haka. The black-clad figures were slapping and stomping, faces stretched into grimaces, chanting the challenge, every movement, every expression on the big screen overhead, telegraphing their intensity, their purpose. And Allie actually had the goosebumps. She had a flash of what the first Europeans must have felt, leaving their ships to be met with this. Because if the ferocity of the group performing the ritual tonight was any indication, it must have been terrifying. She hoped it was terrifying the French, anyway. Well, that was fun, she sighed after the last stare had been delivered, the last hey shouted, and the answering roar of the crowd had died away, everyone finally taking their seats again. Whew, I've been entertained. I'm ready to leave. I know, Kate said happily. That's my favorite. I asked if I could present a proposal for expanding the shoe department, and Simone said yes. He turned to her in surprise, saw her eyes sparkling. She was all but bouncing.
Oh, that's awesome! When are you doing it?
3 weeks from now, July 5th. I've been working on it all week, doing the research, but there's still so much to do. All my boards to prepare, and my regular job too, of course. But it's worth it.
Boards?
Oh, my presentation boards, she explained. Theme board, color board, line board. To show what we'd do, how it would coordinate with our clothing line.
I'll take your word for it, he decided. Though if you want to practice with me before you do it, I'll be happy. We'll be playing here that week, so I'll be around. You could run through it a few times. That'd help on the day.
It would, she said. But really? You'd be willing to do that?
Course. Can't promise to ask intelligent questions, but I'll do my best. It's probably not too different from a footy match. The more you practice every scenario, the more effortless you can make it look, and the more likely you are to win.
I'm going to take you up on that, she said. I'll be using you mercilessly. And that was another flash of imagination that didn't do him any favors at all. Of her on top of him, using him mercilessly. Oh yeah, he'd let her use him. Geez, the celibacy thing was hard, and getting harder all the time, in more ways than one. Some days, he thought he would actually explode.
Heaps of work then?
He forced his mind back with a Herculean effort. Yes, it is, she said, and I have to do projections, too. That's harder, but Hannah's been advising me some. I'm really nervous, but it's exciting. Even if they don't agree to do it, I'm showing that I have ideas, you know? It feels like a big step.
It is a big step. It's awesome,
he said. He loved me, how she tried to help me growing up. And I saw how good a job she did with Jack. And I thought, maybe I could do that too. Maybe I could, if I tried hard. And I would try hard. I'd try so hard. I'd know how to love my child anyway, she said, suddenly sounding fierce, totally unlike Kristen. I'd know how to put my kids' needs above my own. I'd know how to protect my kids. I'd know how to do that. And I would. I would.
Course you would, he said. I'd say you know how to love pretty well, from what I've seen. Real love, where you care more about the other person than yourself. I'd say you'd know all about that.
She remained silent, looking off into the distance, not moving from her spot, leaning against the boot.
So, it wasn't you,
he prompted gently. Hell of a place for this, but he'd take it.
But still, no kids.
No, she sighed, looking back at him again. That was him. Marshall.
What kind of a man doesn't want kids? He wondered.
That kind, I guess. She shrugged. He said... She stopped. You don't want to know this. It's embarrassing. She pushed herself off the car, turned away. We should go.
Kristen, wait, he said, feeling the urgency of it. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but I'd like to know.
She turned back again, looked down, ran the strap of her purse nervously through her hands as she spoke, still not meeting his eyes. It was that, she began, that pregnant women were gross. And she agreed dreamily. I don't think she shares. Just like me. She wasn't happy, though, a half hour later. What does he know? She exploded, startling him from the editorial in The Listener that had captured his attention.
What?
He asked. She was sitting bolt upright on the couch, smoke all but coming out of her ears. This guy, she said with an angry gesture at the computer in her lap. John Farrell. He's used his whole column today to talk about you.
Ah, not impressed, I take it.
Questioning your leadership, she spluttered. Saying you guys can't win. What does he know? And anyway, you did win the series, so how can he say this stuff? You lost one game. He reached out and took his laptop from her, snapped it firmly shut, and set it on the table next to him.
Thought you were checking your email. You just lost your computer privileges.
I can't help it, she muttered. Sue me. I looked.
Well, take my advice. Don't. Goes with the territory. The skipper gets too much credit for what goes right, too much blame for what goes wrong. Always the way of it. And you won't change it. Only thing to do is not to look.
But why isn't it enough to win? She asked. Still angry, he saw. He shrugged.
Because that's how it is. Winning's expected. Not just winning, winning well. And any loss is one too many. Because the ABs are meant to be the best.
He stood up, pulled her to her feet.
And that's over. And we've got a day. Let's get out of here, take that walk, and then come back and get in the sauna. Because I'm still pretty ginger, and I need some anesthetic. And you're just the one to give it to me.
Once been cherished, lovingly tended in true Kiwi style. At rose bushes and camellias growing wild now, overtaking grass that stood high around front porches, where nobody would ever sit. Lots of the houses look okay, though, she said. Like the people just stepped out and never came back. Are they really so unsafe that the whole neighborhood had to be abandoned?
If you look more closely, George told her, you'll see that they're all sitting too low, that they've sunk right down into the ground.
Once he'd pointed it out, she could see it. How could that happen? She asked. How could they just sink?
You see the dirt there in the front garden?
George pointed.
That's liquefaction. That's what everyone thought was good soil. Turned liquid, bubbled to the surface. Nothing for a house to stand on, eh? Just a sea of mud to sink into. And that's what they did. Sink. And crack straight through, some of them.
You know a lot about it, Allie said.
Oh, we've all become geology experts around here,
George assured her. He turned off the residential street onto a main road, to Allie's relief. The sight of all that loss weighed her down, like the liquefied soil of Christchurch, once the solid ground on which so many had built their lives. All those couples, saving and planning, signing their mortgage papers with so much optimism, excited that their dream of home ownership had come true. The chance to own their piece of the pie, taking such care with it, keeping it so neat, tending their gardens so lovingly. She felt her heart break just a little for every one of those lost dreams. She said something of that to George, and he nodded soberly.
Nobody realised how bad it was going to be at first, he said. They were out in their gardens, out in the road, shovelling away the mud by hand, using the portaloos for months on end, thinking it would stop, that it would all go back to normal. But the mud just kept coming, and so did the shakes, and the houses got inspected, eventually condemned. Some of them thought they could fight it, that they could fix the damage or build again, holding on, the last one for streets around. No neighbours, living in a ghost town, the kids playing in the front garden, nobody to kick the footy with, all alone. But eventually they had to give up too. And now they're all gone from here.
He pulled off another main road and stopped in front of a school that, as far as Allie could tell, was open for business.
Look here, he said. This is something to think about, eh?
Allie looked at the grassy playing field, featureless except for a large boulder, twice the height of a man, in its center. What?
That wasn't there before, George said. Nobody saw it come down. But there it was. Next day. Didn't take down the fence around the school or anything, which means it hit above, on the hill there, where you see the empty spot, see?
He pointed, and Allie saw what he meant. A scar on the cliff face behind the school.
And then,
he said,
it bounced high enough to clear the fence, landed 20 metres away, in the centre of the field. More than 2 metres high, that fence is. Gives you an idea of the power of it, how the cliffs and houses came down.
But your house is okay, right? Allie asked. And it's on the cliffs?
Different geology, Sumner,
George said.
And a bit away from the worst of it, which caused me some sleepless nights too, not suffering as much as some. Survivor's guilt, they call that. Reckon but there's something more there now. Playing for the city, for everybody there.
He went on, and she let him talk, glad to listen, to focus on climbing.
You know, that first season, before they got the old stadium fixed up so they could play there, those boys played every game on the road, away from home nearly every night, all year long, while their partners and kids, their parents and grandparents rode it out, sometimes more than one quake a day, not able to be there when one hit, when their kids were crying, not knowing whether the next one would be the really big one that'd do the whole place in. It was rough.
Tough season. Allie got out, clambering up and over a big boulder that surely had no place in the middle of a marked trail.
Hey,
he agreed.
How'd you imagine they finished on the ladder that year?
Not too well, I'm thinking, she said.
You'd be wrong, though. Lost in the final. Barely. All that, and they nearly won the whole thing.
Wow. What do you think it was? That they were, what you said, playing for everybody at home? Or do you think the other teams maybe didn't play them quite as hard? He laughed.
Oh, not bloody likely. That's not the way it works. You're always busting a gut for the win. After the match, you can be mates. While it's happening, you're bashing the hell out of each other, no matter what. That's footy.
He stopped a moment, turned around.
Doing all right?
So he had noticed her breathlessness. I'm good, she said. As long as you keep your elbows to yourself.
Oh, have a bit of compassion on my tender male ego, he complained. We're putting the epic fail tag on that one and shoving it to the back of the cupboard.
Because no Kiwi seemed to be able to run into anyone without stopping for a chat.
How you going?
Nate asked.
Been to the top already or just having a bit of a rest?
Deciding what to do, the young man said in what Allie's untrained ear thought might be an English accent.
How much farther is it to the top? Do you know? Oh, you've got a fair bit left,
Nate admitted, and Allie suppressed a groan. She hadn't dared to ask, because she'd been afraid to hear the answer, and a fair bit definitely sounded ominous. The man looked at his girlfriend.
"Go back," she said instantly. "They told us at the eyesight," she complained to Allie, "that this was a nice walk. This isn't a nice walk. This is a death march."
Oh, not that bad,
Nate protested.
And if we get the mist clearing, you'll get a view to make it all worthwhile.
"Yeah, I'll look online and pretend I was there," the woman said firmly,
making Allie laugh. Allie's attention was diverted by a large, drab-colored bird that had flown up behind the couple and landed on an open daypack.
"Look, Nate,"
she said, pointing.
"What is that? It looks like some kind of parrot."
It is a parrot,
Nate said.
You'll want to watch it.
Too late. The big bird had reached into the pack with a formidable beak and one taloned foot, and was now half in and half out, dragging out the contents. The young woman gave a little shriek, and the man grabbed for the pack, dislodging the bird, but not before it had stolen a packet of sandwiches, with which it flew a little distance off, proceeding to rip open the cling film and starting work on the couple's lunch.
"What was that?"
the young man asked in frustration, stuffing the contents of his pack inside again and closing it up.
That would be your Kia,
Nate, he couldn't resist pointing out.
I'll get you some.
"I don't want chips," she said. "I just want a few of yours."
Which made him roll his eyes.
"Why?" she insisted again.
What, the walk? Because I thought you'd like it, he protested. That it'd be a challenge for you.
Uh-huh, she said skeptically. It wouldn't be that you wanted to do something where you'd be so obviously better than me, would it? Because that was the hardest damn hike I've ever been on. That was ridiculous, and it looked to me like you could have run the whole thing.
There is a race every year,
he pointed out helpfully. She groaned. I so did not need to know that. New Zealanders are crazy. But come on, was that why? He started to laugh. He couldn't help it.
I hope not, because that would be pretty low of me, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. She scowled.
Never mind,
he consoled her, reaching for her hand. She looked so cute, with that frown drawing her dark brows together. So severe, like the world's sexiest librarian, about to shush him.
I'll take you somewhere else tomorrow, and you can outperform me. And Susan there, back at the guest house, he added with another smile. She does massage. A shower and an hour or so with her, and you'll be a new woman.
And both of those things did help. But when he reached for her that evening, she looked at him in astonishment. You have got to be kidding, she told him. You have no idea how sore and tired this body is.
Oh, I have a pretty fair idea,
he smiled, leaning over to kiss her.
And sex is a pretty good anesthetic. Come on, let me make you feel better.
You'd better be prepared to do all the work, she sighed. But her protest was pitifully weak, because his fingers were running softly over the sensitive skin between her breasts in the low-cut undershirt she had worn to bed. It could be like having sex with a blow-up doll, she got out, because I'm not moving. But if you want a sex toy to play with... She squirmed a little. He was using one finger to trace the outline of her shirt now, and that felt good.
I'll play with you, he promised. I'll do it all. You just lie there and be my toy.
So she did. He went slowly, his hands, then his mouth gentle against her sensitive skin, until she could swear she was aware of every separate nerve ending. He was pulling the edge of the shirt a bit further down, still concentrating on the tops of her breasts, the valley between them. His touch so light it nearly tickled. And then, when she was moving a little underneath him, despite herself, he transferred his attention to her inner thighs, finding erogenous zones she hadn't even realized she had. By the time he was slowly pulling up the undershirt, caressing and kissing every centimeter he uncovered along the way, she was moaning. And when he had finally finished playing with her and was sliding inside, beginning his long, slow ride, she really was as limp and boneless as any sex doll, and feeling a whole lot better.
"Good night, toy,"
he murmured at last with a gentle kiss, pulling the duvet over her. But she barely heard him, because she was already sinking into sleep. Allie gets her card back.
"And here we are,"
Nate said. They had come down out of the high pass to the blue sky in the cool breeze. Gray stones, green grasses, the mountains rising steeply to the west, the sheep grazing in the paddock beyond. The mainland, and his heart felt easy, as it always did down here. He liked Wellington, had built a good life there. But this was something else. The peace, the vistas, the endless space of the mountain, plain, valley, and sea. This was home, and someday he knew he'd be coming back. "It is," Allie said, and he had to work to remember what they had been talking about. "It's so much better, isn't it? Being here? Outdoors?" She gave a spin, arms flung wide, ponytail flying, her broad smile reaching all the way to those sparkling dark eyes, and his heart filled just a little bit more at the sight of her, the way she fit here. "Come on," she urged. "Race you. First one to the top of that big one that's shaped like an M there." She pointed to a stone near the apex of the slope. "First one there wins. Ready, set, go." And before he could say anything, she was running. He made it there first, of course, by a fair margin. And that was as far as he got, because while he was still struggling to get off the ground, she had caught up, wriggled and stretched her way to the top, following a path he couldn't even begin to pick out, and was lying on her stomach, peering over the edge at him. "I win," she pointed out unnecessarily. "And yes, now I forgive you for the horrible hike yesterday, which goes down in history as another one of Nate's bad ideas. Do you want some help finding your way up here?"
"Yes,"
he was forced to admit.
"I do."
"I can even feel better about being your sex toy now," she said, when she'd climbed back down and coached him up the thing, which, thankfully, actually did have a few.
"Is this a trick question?"
he asked, giving her another gentle kiss.
"Been almost a week, eh? I've missed you for, I'd say, maybe 5 days and 12 hours, somewhere in there."
She ran her hands under his t-shirt sleeves, stretching her fingers to reach around the heavy muscle, and thought about the tattoo she'd be kissing later, going slowly, all the way from his forearm to his shoulder, then moving to his chest, about how she'd be loving every bit of him, and how good it would feel to have her hands on those arms when the muscles were flexed, supporting his weight, when he was lying over her, murmuring the words she loved to hear, moving so slowly, taking exactly as long as she needed, until she was dissolving with the bliss of it. She couldn't wait, but she wanted to wait, wanted to see him smile at her, wanted to tell him how proud she'd been to watch him last night, wanted to hear him tell her about the game, and then feel his arms, and every other part of him, too. "If I'd known how good you were going to make me feel," she said, wishing she didn't have to let go of him, "our celibacy wouldn't have lasted nearly so long. This has been a really, really great couple of months. You should have told me how good you were at it."
"Yeah,"
he agreed,
because that would have worked so well with you, I'm sure.
She pulled back with a smile for him. You're right. Why do you have to be right so often? And okay, I'm ready for my surprise. This is the surprise? She asked when he parked in the CBD, helped her out of the car, then went to the boot and pulled out a guitar case. You going to play for me? Or are you in some kind of band?
Just wait, he promised.
He held her hand for the few blocks walk to Expressaholic and took her inside, where he propped the guitar case carefully against the window, next to a table at the front, a table with a reserved sign on it. He pulled out her chair, held it for her with a courtesy he always showed her.
Trim flat white?
He asked.
Or tea?
Tea, please.
Anything to eat?
She laughed. No, I'm good. He came back to the table after placing their order.
I thought about doing this the first place I saw you, he told her.
He was standing opposite her, legs braced, arms relaxed, strong and broad, solid as a totara tree. Her Liam.
The climbing gym,
he went on to explain.
Didn't seem quite right, though. So I decided maybe use that day when I was walking down the street with Toro, looked in the window, saw you in here, and couldn't believe my luck. Still can't, every single day when I wake up knowing how much I love you, and that you love me too.
She could feel her eyes misting over already. Reached for his hand. He squeezed hers in return, then let it go, and instead of sitting down, reached for the guitar case, opened it and pulled out the wooden instrument, then set the case back down, moved his chair away from the table, and seated himself with the guitar in his lap, pulling the strap around his neck. Now? She asked, brows raised.
Now,
he confirmed. Wow, singing in public, she said happily. The warmth in his eyes, as always, went straight to her heart.
Listening to Maori sing is the other New Zealand national sport, didn't you know? On every tourist's list. Reckon I'll make it into somebody's travel diary today.
Whatever she would have answered was cut off as he began to strum the instrument, the tune soothing, sweet and slow. And then he started to sing, his deep voice filling every corner of the cafe, his gaze steady on her. The conversations around them ceasing, all action stilling, as everybody stopped to listen. She didn't know what most of the words meant, of course, though the poetry of them, the meaning she saw in his eyes, was making her melt. And then he began the English verses, and he was calling her his angel, telling her he would love her forever, singing words she thought she'd never hear again, not from somebody who meant them, somebody she could trust to mean them.
Through sickness and health, till death do us part.
And then it was Maori again, and this time she knew what it meant.
E ipo,
he finished, drawing it out, with one last strum across the strings. And she knew what that meant too, because she'd heard it before, murmured in the night. My darling. The last note died away, but he just sat and looked at her. She couldn't say anything, couldn't answer him, because she was crying. Her hands were at her mouth, her eyes streaming as everyone in the cafe began to applaud. He set the guitar carefully against the window, handed her his napkin with a smile, reached for her other hand across the triangular table.
I'm a pretty imperfect fella, he began. Made heaps of mistakes in my life, as I may have mentioned. But I've tried my best to learn from every one of them. And one thing I know for sure,
he went on, the deep voice losing a little of its firmness, his eyes beginning to glisten with unshed tears,
is that when you find something...
Can
Can we have a baby?
He laughed. We can have as many babies as you like. I'm Mary. But they'll have me for a dad, you know. Won't be as pretty as you, eh?
They'll be the luckiest babies in the world, she said, and she'd never meant anything more. Because they will have you for a dad. Besides, and she was laughing herself now, I'm pretty enough for the both of us.
Yes, you are. And that is a yes?
He prompted. Yes. She couldn't seem to stop laughing. Yes, that's a yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, then stood, took her in his arms, and kissed her. Kristen heard the clapping, the whistling around her. She knew in one part of her brain that this whole thing was going to be on YouTube before the day was over, and that she might even watch it herself, because she'd never get enough of this moment, or this man. The end. Kristen hadn't come back after leaving in mid-afternoon with Liam, which wasn't much of a surprise. But that left Allie to get dressed to see Nate by herself. She raided Kristen's closet, as always, stood daunted by the array of choice, wishing she'd asked Kristen to pick out an outfit for her earlier. Pants? Skirt? Dress? And what kind of shoes? Well, skirt or dress, she decided. Nate liked looking at her legs. She'd figure that much out. And if she wanted his attention tonight, the shorter and tighter the better. She was a little nervous about the evening, she thought, fingering a flirty little deep blue skirt with a star-spangled chiffon overlay. Getting drunk here alone, that would just be too pathetic. Anyway, I need to start saving. I only just got Nate's birthday weekend paid off, and I'm not going to have anybody buying groceries anymore, or taking me out. And here I've been, Kristen said in distress, going on and on about how happy I am. I wish I'd known, so I could have been more sensitive. I'm so sorry. Don't be, Allie assured her. Hearing about you and Liam doesn't make me sad. Thinking about Nate and me, that makes me sad. But hearing about you, that makes me feel better. Being angry at Nate and sad about what had happened, Allie found, didn't make watching the All Blacks lose to the Springboks in South Africa any easier. She hadn't wanted to get up in the wee hours with Kristen to watch the game, hadn't wanted to care so much. But in the end she had, because she hadn't been able to sleep. And then she wished she hadn't. That's going to make it awfully hard for them to win the championship, isn't it? Kristen asked, when the referee finally blew his whistle to end the game, in which the huge Springboks forwards had simply outmuscled the All Blacks. The kicking had been a bright spot, though. Nick Wilkinson, the fullback, making all but one of his attempts. And, again, it had been close, although Allie knew what Nate would have said. The close was nice, but a loss was a loss. With a word, an adjustment of the hand, the rope, then swept the gym with her eyes, making one of the constant...
If you read John Farrell's column today, you'd know it too. The stats don't lie. Have you looked at the ladder by any chance? Are you blind that you haven't seen how out of form they are? All those handling errors? How shocking the set piece is looking?
I don't care what some columnist says, Allie flared back. She'd read it too, and her resentment had been simmering ever since. Farrell's always down on the All Blacks. I don't think he believes half of what he says anyway. He's just trying to stir up controversy. I'd like to see him, or you for that matter, go out there and do anything close to what those guys do every single day. I'd like to see you put your body on the line for New Zealand, week in and week out, the way Nate does. Then you might have some room to talk.
Gets paid a bloody fortune for it, too. The big man scoffed. It's not a charity. You pay me close to $1 million a year? You'll see how much I'm willing to do for New Zealand. And what do you imagine you'd know about it anyway? Some Yank girl thinking she's going to set Kiwis right about the All Blacks. Blow that for a joke. I know a whole lot more about it than you.
Allie was trembling now. She felt her hands fisting at her sides, itched to smash the smirk right off this jerk's face. His friend was looking a little worried, she saw, as he gave a yank to the other man's arm.
Pull your head in, mate, he cautioned. Don't want to have a stoush with a girl. Let's climb, eh?
Robbo was at Allie's side now, alerted by the rising voices.
What's going on?
He asked her.
Your little friend here reckons she knows more about rugby than Kiwis do. That's what,
Allie's opponent said.
Bloody arrogant Americans. Stick to gridiron, he told Allie contemptuously. Maybe you know something about that. Though I doubt it. You probably just like how the boys look in their tight jerseys. Well, she does know.
Me. He wants to meet me for lunch tomorrow. I probably shouldn't, though, she realized. I need to save my money. She'd turned her phone off, she remembered, reached under the pillow for it, and checked. A string of voicemail messages that she wouldn't be answering, the reason she'd turned the phone off in the first place. Journalists from both New Zealand and Australia, wanting her reaction. A text from Lachlan, saying how upset everyone at the gym had been at the news, which was nice of him. And one from Nate.
I heard. Find you as soon as I can.
Well, that was one conversation she definitely wasn't having. Call her a coward, but she just couldn't do it. She texted quickly back. Sorry about it. Don't call me. Good luck on Sat. Don't tell Liam I lost my job, she begged Kristen. I don't want Nate to know. Allie, please, promise me. It would upset him, I know. And what's the point? All this is going to be hard enough on him, and it's not like there's anything he can do about it. At least don't tell Liam until they're back here. I mean, obviously, it won't be a secret at that point. Please? Wait till then? Okay, Kristen said reluctantly. Thanks, Allie sighed. And that's all the nobility I've got. Maybe by tomorrow, she said, the tears closing her throat again. I'll be able to think of some alternative to just lying down and dying. You think? Oh, sweetie, Kristen said. I know you will. Finding Allie. Nate tried ringing Allie again as soon as the plane landed. No voicemail greeting this time. Instead, a recording telling him that her number was no longer in service. Had she checked of his head toward the counter.
Thought she was hurting the gym's image. And since he knew you'd broken up with her, he shrugged, said she was a liability.
Nate felt sick. Everything seemed to catch up with him. His part in all this, his responsibility for it, weighed him down, like a 115-kilo prop lying on top of him in the breakdown, and he couldn't shove it off again.
Cheers, he said blankly to Robbo, and headed for his car again.
Kristen, he thought. Kristen would know where she was. Bound to. Allie might have taken refuge with Hannah and Drew, he thought suddenly. That would have been like them, to offer her a place. Yeah, that could be it. He just had to find Kristen and ask her, and then go after Allie.
What do you mean you don't know?
He asked in frustration half an hour later. He'd leaned on Mako's doorbell till he had finally answered, wearing nothing but a pair of pajama bottoms and appearing as menacing as only an enraged Maori could, short on sleep and interrupted in the middle of making up for lost time with his fiancée. If Mako hadn't been his best mate, Nate actually would have been a bit scared. As it was, Mako had finally taken pity on him, allowed him as far in as the lounge, then disappeared to get Kristen, who was sitting on the couch now beside Mako in her dressing gown. hair disheveled and looking a bit worried herself.
I mean, I don't know, she repeated. I'm sorry, Nate. She got fired from her job, and she was in pretty bad shape. I tried to get her to stay here, in the flat, I mean, in Wellington, because I didn't like the way she looked. But she said no. Then I suggested that she go up and stay at Hannah and Drew's batch for a week or two. Give her some time to decide what to do. Hannah offered, she explained, giving Nate another stab of guilt to go with the arrows that were piercing him everywhere now. And Nate eased to the curb, shifted into park. A wooden-framed house, its stark lines unadorned by any trim or embellishment, painted white much too long ago, and divided into flats. Iron bars on the narrow windows, front garden concreted over, like most on the street, to allow more parking. None of the trees he'd seen on the other streets, some of their leaves changing now. Just a bit of rubbish, blowing down the road in the crisp autumn breeze. Nate shoved the GPS unit into the glove box and got out, taking care to lock the doors behind him. Walked up the uneven pavement, the 4 cracked concrete steps. 2 doors, one to the downstairs flat, the other to the upstairs, he guessed. She was A. Downstairs, then. Worse and worse. He pressed the button and waited. Allie heard the doorbell, got up off her narrow bed with a sigh. She'd been doing some online research, dismayed by the cost of every program she'd found. But this was her future, she reminded herself, as she walked past the kitchen that her new roommates never seemed to clean. Through the depressingly messy living room, the reason she spent most of her free time in her bedroom, toward the insistent bell, ringing again now. She was going to be investing in herself. Anything worth having was worth working for. And, she hoped, worth going into debt for. Because she needed to do this. She needed to do it herself. She bent cautiously to the peephole, drilled into the cheap, hollow wooden door. She wasn't expecting anybody, and the last occupants of the flat had apparently not been any too savory. Some of their former associates, or customers, hadn't got the news that their pals had been evicted and continued to show up from time to time.
You should do. But they have sport management courses in NZ too, you know, and gyms as well. And that's where you...
He broke off, then went on again.
That's where I think you belong. Where I hope you think you belong. With me.
I don't have a visa, though, she faltered. Or the money.
They have student visas, he insisted, and you have somebody to help you get one, and to help you with the rest as well. Me. You have me. That's the whole idea, that we're helping each other, supporting each other, loving each other.
He shifted a little closer on the shabby couch.
I know I'm rubbish at relationships, he said. I know it. But I'm trainable. I'm coachable. I can do most things if I try. And I'd be trying. I promise you that. Don't give up on me, Ellie. Please don't. Because I need you.
If you really think... She couldn't think how to say it, how to be sure. But he seemed to know, because his next words answered her, and the emotion was bubbling up from deep inside now, because what he was saying was exactly what she needed to hear.
You don't have anything to prove to me, he insisted, and she could feel the tears welling, spilling over as he went on. You don't have to be anything more than what you are, because what you are is awesome. You don't have to accomplish anything else for me to love you, because I already do. But if you need to do another course to get you where you want to go, I'll do everything I can to help you do it. All I'm asking is, do it with me.
She brushed the tears away with one
I'll never give up on you. I may get mad at you from time to time, but I'll never give up on you." She laughed a little, raised a hand to swipe at her eyes. "And, shoot, you've got me crying again. And this is the world's longest speech, so," she announced, lifting her glass from the shelter of Nate's arms. "Everybody, I'll just say thanks." "Am I done?" she begged him, as everyone at the table raised their glasses in return. Everyone who mattered most to both of them. Everyone who needed to hear what he had to say next. "I don't know how you do that. That's hard."
"You're almost done," he promised. "Just got a bit of listening to do now, because I've got one more thing to say."
He took her glass from her, set it down with his own.
"This is going to be a tough one for me, too," he told her. "Hoping you'll give me a pass if I stuff up. But you've done that so many times now. What's one more?"
His heart began to pound as he took both her hands in his, turned her to face him, beating harder than it had during the most important rugby game he'd ever played, because it was beating for her now, and she mattered more than anything ever had.
2 years ago today," he began, "I met you, and I made a pretty bad impression, and then I made a worse one. And after that,"
he said, with a smile for her that she returned, though her eyes had widened, and she didn't seem to be breathing any too easily herself,
"I really notched up a couple of epic fails. And even though that day didn't go too well,"
he went on, trying to tell her with his eyes everything he held in his heart,